Hello, welcome to A Book a Day. Today, I'm going to talk about a book called The Art of Risk, The New Science of Courage, Caution, and Chance. My reason for recommending this book is tied to a personal experience of mine. At the age of 33, my family and I made an important decision to move to an unfamiliar city and start a new life. This decision meant that my family and I would face significant uncertainties and risks. I have always been a person who seeks stability and avoids risks. I never invest in stocks or funds, and I don't leave my comfort zone in life and work without thorough preparation. I always need to be fully prepared before trying something new. Suddenly, at the age of 33, I found myself inclined to take risks, which was quite confusing for me. I wondered if it was a delayed teenage rebellion. I also reflected on my life. The past 33 years have been smooth, but was it the result of playing it safe? Would my life be better or worse if I were more willing to take risks? It was in this confusion that I opened the book The Art of Risk. Interestingly, I found that the author, Kate Sukol, faced similar issues. Kate Sukol is a columnist for New Scientist magazine in the United States. She graduated from Carnegie Mellon University and Georgia Institute of Technology with degrees in cognitive psychology and engineering psychology. However, unlike me, Sukol's early life was particularly adventurous. From a young age, she was fearless. As an adult, she climbed mountains, danced with sharks, backpacked in wilderness areas, and even traveled across the Middle East and Africa with her newborn baby. But at 40, Sukol suddenly found herself becoming more conventional. The thing she looked forward to most in life was waiting for a new season of an American TV show. She even discovered that she no longer had the courage and confidence to enter a new marriage. This change also troubled Sukol. She felt like she had become a spectator of life rather than a participant. So, like me, Sukol began to ask herself, between stability and risk-taking, which leads to a better life? If one must choose between the two, how can one avoid loss? After all, middle-aged people not only need to make themselves happier, but also need to raise children, take care of parents, pay mortgages, and save for retirement. Each of these is a heavy responsibility. Often, what we fear is not the risk itself, but the worry that it will affect our ability to fulfill these responsibilities. After 4 years of contemplation and academic interviews, Sukol finally wrote the English version of The Art of Risk in 2016. This time, she had thoroughly figured it out. Sukol tells us that the concept of risk sounds mysterious, but in reality, not only does buying stocks, participating in extreme sports, or starting a business constitute a risk, any behavior or decision that could lead to negative consequences is a risk. From this perspective, making work decisions is a risk, dating is a risk, and raising children is even more so. Decisions in life, big or small, involve elements of risk. The so-called choice between risk and safety is actually a false dilemma. Seeking safety can also lead to negative consequences and is a risk. What we should really care about is how to turn risk into opportunities that benefit us. Of course, to know what to do, we first need to understand why. In The Art of Risk, Sukol first explains from the perspectives of neuroscience and psychology how the brain functions when making decisions and under what circumstances it tends to take risks. She then interviewed many extreme athletes, investment experts, and surgeons to find answers on how to control risk and achieve optimal outcomes from those who frequently take risks. Whether you are a cautious person or someone who enjoys challenges, The Art of Risk can help you better understand your decision-making process and provide valuable reference cases. New Scientist magazine's recommendation for this book is a call to all of us to seize opportunities and take smarter risks in life. Next, I will introduce the main content of the book in 3 parts. First, we will answer a common question. When it comes to taking risks, people generally feel that they make decisions based on instinct. So how exactly does our brain complete this decision-making process? In the second part, I will analyze whether the so-called spirit of adventure is innate or acquired. In the third part, following Sukol's narrative, I will summarize some practical advice on how to skillfully use risk to make wiser life choices. Part 1. How does the brain complete the decision-making process? As someone who pursues safety, I have always envied those with a spirit of adventure. I believe you have felt this envy too. Many literary works, movies, and plays praise the spirit of adventure. From the Greek hero Achilles in the Iliad to today's big entrepreneurs like Jobs and Musk, we have always assumed that heroes are supposed to be daring and face difficulties head-on. In everyday life, we say, high risk brings high return. In a narrow pass, the brave one wins. On the other hand, being hesitant seems to be a negative trait. We think that some people achieve massive wealth, happy family lives, and respected social status because they have a spirit of adventure and the courage to face risks. However, the spirit of adventure is hard to quantify. We have all had this experience. When recalling a major decision in life, what exactly motivated us to take that critical step seems unclear. Sometimes, when we see successful people achieving extraordinary feats because of their willingness to take risks, we blame ourselves. Why can't I be that kind of person? Do I lack the fate for risk-taking? But Sukul says there's no such thing as fate. Whether a person is inclined to take risks when making decisions is actually determined by neuroscience. In our brain, the part responsible for judging risks is called the mesolimbic pathway. This pathway is composed of 3 parts. The first part is the basal ganglia. Located near the brainstem, the basal ganglia is also known as the lizard brain. What does this mean? Millions of years ago, some marine organisms moved onto land in search of a more favorable environment for survival. These organisms are our ancestors. The evolution from marine organisms to humans went through several stages, including amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. During the reptile stage, the brain evolved the basal ganglia, which was inherited by subsequent species. Therefore, the basal ganglia is also called the reptile brain or lizard brain. From this history, you can guess that the lizard brain is responsible for the most basic desires, such as eating, mating, and companionship. For the brain, these are the strongest temptations buried in our nature. Once external signals trigger these desires, the lizard brain system is quickly activated. However, making decisions solely based on the lizard brain is extremely dangerous. For example, in primitive societies, humans needed to hunt for protein. The act of hunting was driven by the lizard brain. But if one relied only on instinct during hunting and did not observe the environment, they could be attacked by fierce beasts and lose their life. In civilized societies, where maintaining basic order and stability is crucial, we need to control our instincts even more. At this point, the brain activates the second structure to participate in decision-making. This structure is called the prefrontal cortex, unique to intelligent beings like humans. Its function is judgment, reasoning, and inhibition. As the saying goes, think thrice before acting. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for thinking thrice. It is connected to the lizard brain and exchanges information through neuronal connections. When the lizard brain wants to follow instinct, the prefrontal cortex considers more complex factors such as long-term goals and consequences of actions and steps in to prevent destructive outcomes from instinct. For example, American scientists once conducted an experiment. They had 2 groups of participants play a gambling game. One group played normally, while the other group had their cerebral cortex interfered with by electromagnetic coils. The results showed that when magnetic pulses made the prefrontal cortex more active, the players became very cautious and unwilling to take risks. But if the activity of the prefrontal cortex was suppressed, even if the game was already lost, the players would bravely take a gamble. If the brain is compared to a car, then the lizard brain is the accelerator, and the prefrontal cortex is the brake. Both are essential for safe driving. Besides these 2 structures, the brain's decision-making is also influenced by the limbic system. The limbic system mainly consists of 4 parts. First, the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain. Second, the amygdala, responsible for evaluating real-time situations and perceiving fear and anxiety. Third, the anterior cingulate cortex, which helps us learn from past experiences. Fourth, the insula, which regulates emotions. You could say that the limbic system is like a super server. It integrates data on a person's emotions, feelings, experiences, and more, and calls upon them during the decision-making process. The proverb says, think thrice before acting. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for this thrice thinking. It is connected to the reptilian brain, exchanging information through neural connections. When the reptilian brain wants to follow instinct, the prefrontal cortex considers more complex factors, such as long-term goals and consequences of actions, stepping in to prevent destructive outcomes from instinctual actions. For instance, American scientists conducted an experiment where they had two groups of subjects play a gambling game. One group played normally, while the other was subjected to electromagnetic interference in the cerebral cortex. They found that when magnetic pulses made the prefrontal cortex more active, the players became very cautious and risk-averse. However, if the activity of the prefrontal cortex was suppressed, players would take bold risks even when defeat was imminent. If the brain were compared to a car, the reptilian brain would be the accelerator, and the prefrontal cortex would be the brake. Both are essential for the car to safely navigate the road. Besides these two structures, brain decision-making is also influenced by the limbic system. The so-called limbic system primarily comprises four parts: the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain; the amygdala, responsible for assessing real-time situations and perceiving fear and anxiety; the anterior cingulate cortex, which helps us learn from past experiences; and the insular cortex, which regulates emotions. The limbic system is like a super server, integrating data such as emotions, sensations, and experiences, and calling upon them during the decision-making process. This might seem strange. We often say that decisions should be rational. Wouldn't invoking emotional data be detrimental? Not necessarily. Brain risk assessment during decision-making is very complex and multifaceted. Author Sukul gives an example. Gale, a chemist and a quintessential science guy, follows a principle: every choice must first undergo data analysis to select the option with the highest success rate before taking action. Yet Gale occasionally goes to casinos for a bit of recreational gambling. He is particularly calm and composed during this process, not tense at all. Sukul asked Gale, "Why are you so calm? Is it because you've calculated that you're sure to win money?" Gale honestly answered, "Not really." He explained that every gambling game has different odds of winning. In the long run, gamblers are more likely to lose than win. Gale's favorite game is a dice game, especially prone to losses. Knowing he is likely to lose money, why isn't he nervous? Gale explained that when he plays, there is a crowd around him, cheering and sighing together. This brings him great joy and pleasure. For this feeling, he's willing to risk losing money. In this example, Gale's brain incorporates emotional factors into the decision-making process, overriding the cold, hard data of winning and losing odds. Data is rational, but it doesn't understand the human experience of the game. It can't estimate the emotional value, nor can it solely control the operation of the brain. By now, you might have understood. The midbrain limbic pathway, consisting of the reptilian brain, prefrontal cortex, and limbic system, is essentially a super probability computer. It links human desires, rationality, and emotions, then starts calculating. What options do I have? How much reward can each option bring, and what are the risks? During the calculation, the three components counterbalance each other. The fastest emerging instincts are constrained by rationality and experience. Overly cautious thoughts are stimulated by desires and needs. Thus, the brain's design in decision-making mechanisms can be said to be quite ingenious. But here's the problem. Although the three components always pull against each other, they may not always be in balance. Influenced by genetics and development, some people have particularly developed prefrontal cortices, while others have stronger limbic systems, which affects their decision-making styles. Additionally, external interventions also play a significant role. In 2014, an American medical study found that chronic alcohol abuse can cause irreversible structural damage to the prefrontal cortex. Patients become more impulsive, unable to weigh pros and cons rationally. This is akin to a malfunction in the probability computer's chip. Part 2 is the spirit of adventure innate or acquired. After discussing so much about the brain, what you might be most curious about is the ultimate question: is the spirit of adventure innate? The book's answer is, genetic factors have a significant impact, but it's not 100%. For example, there is a gene in the human body called DRD4, commonly known as the adventure gene. This gene contains a special dopamine receptor, D4. The D4 receptor controls the dopamine levels in the midbrain limbic pathway, particularly the reptilian brain. We know that dopamine, a chemical substance, makes people feel happy. If the reptilian brain, the accelerator of the brain, produces a particularly large amount of dopamine, We become extremely excited and more inclined to take risks for immediate benefits regardless of consequences. A common mental disorder called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is characterized by an uncontrollable attraction to external stimuli and delayed responses to intended tasks. The essence of this disorder is a problem in the brain's decision-making system. For example, a group of elementary school students in a classroom sees a bird fly by the window. Everyone sees it and finds it interesting. At that moment, everyone needs to make a decision: continue listening to the class and miss watching the bird, or go out to watch the bird and get scolded by the teacher. Most kids' rationality tells them that their main task is to listen to the class and stay seated. But children with ADHD immediately get excited and run out the door without a second thought. American scientists have studied this phenomenon and found that ADHD patients have a variant of the DRD4 gene, known as 7R. This variant causes the brain to secrete a large amount of dopamine in a short time when stimulated externally, driving the reptilian brain to work at full capacity. As a result, the other two components of the brain are overwhelmed before they can respond. Not only ADHD patients, but people carrying the 7R variant of the adventure gene in sports, financial activities, and social interactions tend to be more aggressive than average. For example, a 7R carrier skiing is more likely to attempt dangerous high-difficulty maneuvers, even at the risk of injury. Therefore, the 7R variant is also nicknamed the novelty-seeking gene. The question arises, is the spirit of adventure only present in those carrying the novelty-seeking gene? The answer is no. Author Sukul, who had undergone genetic testing, found that although she has always been an extreme sports enthusiast, she does not carry the 7R variant. This implies that there is only a correlation, not a causality, between genes and the spirit of adventure. The adventure gene or novelty-seeking gene simply creates an individual variable, not a definitive answer. The brain's decision-making process is influenced by hundreds of genes. The adventure gene is just one that has been identified, while the roles of others are yet to be discovered. To consider the adventure gene as the sole source is a narrow view. Besides genetic factors, Sukul also discovered that social environment influences people's willingness to take risks. This might sound abstract, so let's consider an example. We often hear about manly valor. Traditional beliefs suggest that most men are naturally suited for adventure, as part of their masculine nature. Women, on the contrary, are presumed to be naturally quiet and shy. This isn't entirely a bias. Scientific research has confirmed that adult males secrete 7 to 8 times more testosterone than adult females. Testosterone levels affect physical strength, stamina, and aggression. With this innate advantage, men naturally have more capacity and impulse for adventure. However, this is a general situation. Within each gender and even each individual, the levels of testosterone vary greatly. More than 20 years ago, it was commonly believed in sports circles that extreme sports like rock climbing, surfing, and parkour were only suitable for men, as women couldn't handle them physically or mentally. Over time, however, it was discovered that there are women with high levels of testosterone who can master extreme sports. They just lack the opportunity to showcase their skills. Today, 30% of athletes sponsored by some American extreme sports brands are women. This change is due to the progress of social concepts. Not only in sports, but women are also becoming more proactive and adventurous in education, career choices, and marriage. Thus, adventure is neither a male privilege nor an innate talent. Our understanding of it is continually deepening. Part 3: How to cleverly use adventure to make wiser life choices. Now you know that the spirit of adventure is not entirely a predetermined fate. From changes in social concepts to personal adjustments and interventions, all can influence our attitude towards risk, thereby affecting the outcomes of adventurous decisions. So, how should a smart decision maker turn adventure into an opportunity in life? The first piece of advice Sukul offers is know yourself. In the process of writing this book, Sukul interviewed many successful adventurers, including venture capitalists, extreme sports athletes, and veterans of special forces. She found that these adventurers share a common trait: a clear understanding of themselves. They consider not only which choice has the highest reward in the face of immediate risk, but also other questions. For example, do they tend to hit the brakes or hit the gas when under stress? In what situations are they most likely to make mistakes? A person's style of adventure is often the accumulation of a series of experiences. Forcing oneself to try a completely new style, even if it seems to offer greater short-term rewards, might not be suitable. Only by finding a manageable style of adventure and adjusting promptly when things go awry can one avoid the error of a desperate gamble. Apart from self-knowledge, Sukul also suggests that we should consider what factors might unconsciously influence our judgment. A typical case is the disruption caused by social circles. American sociologists conducted an experiment showing that when teenagers play adventure games, their strategies are more conservative if they play alone. However, if several peers are present, the players become more aggressive. This is because teenagers value social relationships highly. Gaining peers' attention is an important emotional reward for the brain. To get this reward, players feel the impulse to take a risk. In fact, not only teenagers, but adults' decisions are also influenced by social interactions. For instance, when facing significant life decisions like marriage, investment, or changing jobs, we often seek opinions from acquaintances. If their choices tend to converge, we are also happy to follow the crowd. However, following the crowd may not always be the most beneficial choice for us. Here we can introduce a concept called groupthink. Yale University psychologist Irving Janis found that before the 1941 Pearl Harbor attack, President Roosevelt and his staff received numerous reports of a potential unprovoked attack by Japan. Why didn't they believe it? Because Roosevelt and his handpicked senior officials were all strong-willed and overly confident individuals. They influenced each other, reinforcing the prejudice that Japan wouldn't dare to start a war without considering a more complete set of variables. Lower-ranking officials, even if they had ideas, dared not risk confronting their superiors with a unanimous stance and had to abandon independent judgment. This is a classic case of how groupthink affects the quality of decision-making. Another factor that is often overlooked is emotion. As mentioned earlier, when assessing the benefits of different choices, emotional value is an important metric. But emotion not only pleases us, it can also envelop and even blind us. Impulsive shopping is one example. The pleasure felt while adding items to an online shopping cart is real. However, it can make you forget that after the shopping spree, credit card bills need to be paid. In this scenario, overly excited emotions hinder our ability to make rational analysis. At this point, you need to make an effort to activate your cerebral cortex to balance the overly active reptilian brain. In addition to the above two suggestions, Sukul also reminds us that successful adventurers are often excellent planners. She once heard a golden quote from a psychologist: "Successful adventurers think thoroughly and prepare meticulously. They keep taking risks to achieve long-term goals." In contrast, unsuccessful adventurers only focus on immediate results. So, how exactly do you plan for an adventure? Sukul consulted a neurosurgeon named Baskin. Coincidentally, I once heard another neurosurgeon describe his work as being on the edge of an abyss, walking on thin ice. In neurosurgery, the uncertainty is immense. Two patients with the same type of brain tumor, but different ages, physical conditions, and medical histories may require completely different treatment plans. During surgery, whether to continue in the face of an accident or to stop immediately, both choices carry significant risks. This is a huge challenge for the surgeon. How does Baskin, an American surgeon, train himself to face such high-pressure, high-risk work? He shared 3 experiences. The first is mental preparation and expectation management. Baskin says that successful surgeons often have unwavering confidence in their abilities, but they use a healthy fear to balance this confidence. No matter how experienced a doctor is, they need to stay alert mentally, constantly reminding themselves that surgery carries risks and unexpected, even catastrophic, events can happen. Setting realistic expectations allows one to remain emotionally stable and more rational in crisis management. Baskin's second experience is thorough training and preparation. Preparing for surgery, like a dancer rehearsing, requires attention to every detail. Baskin's habit is to repeatedly visualize the entire surgical procedure in his mind, considering all possible problems. What if an artery ruptures? What clamp should be used to stop the bleeding? If the clamp pierces the artery, what kind of suture should be used to stitch it? What if the suture size is not suitable? Baskin doesn't just think one step ahead. He plans 3, 5, even 10 steps ahead. This contingency planning behavior is facilitated by the brain's prefrontal cortex. Baskin's mental rehearsals of emergency plans are deliberate practices that mature the prefrontal cortex, forming a muscle memory-like response mechanism. Once faced with an actual emergency, the brain won't go blank. It can retrieve prepared plans from its database to confront the danger. Not only seasoned surgeons like Baskin, but every doctor in their career undergoes countless such trainings. In medical school, tutors often ask students, "What would you do in this situation?" Bombarding them with hypothetical questions gradually makes advanced planning a second nature for young doctors, accustoming their prefrontal cortex to dealing with mistakes and uncertainties. In a way, successful adventurers are seldom born, they are almost always trained. Learning to face failure is also part of self-training. Baskin always remembers a disaster he caused on the operating table. During an aneurysm removal surgery, a blood vessel burst just as he cut into the tumor. His brain seemed to shut down, and he stood there completely unable to recall the rehearsed steps. Fortunately, other doctors took over and quickly stitched up the vessel, saving the patient. After the surgery, Baskin's heart rate soared to 190, he was drenched in sweat and completely broke down. At that time, his mentor told him, "Tomorrow morning, there's another aneurysm removal surgery, and you'll lead it. You must re-experience that environment, face your past fears and panic, to learn to handle them properly and grow into a real doctor." Baskin's third experience is this: if you decide to embark on an adventure, it's better to break your big goal into a series of smaller ones. It's like the saying goes, eat your meals one bite at a time. The benefit of doing this is that every time you complete a small goal, your brain receives a certain motivational signal, keeping its excitement level always at the optimal level. The so-called optimal level is where the brain is neither too excited nor too subdued. In this state, the midbrain's limbic pathways can always maintain focus and better mobilize experience, intuition, and habits to help us make the right decisions. Another benefit of setting small goals is that it makes it easier to assess the situation and control the overall picture. Baskin explains that for a neurosurgeon, knowing when to stop a surgery can be more important than completing it methodically. Sometimes, after 2/3 of a brain tumor has been removed, the pressure on the patient's brain is reduced, and the swelling is alleviated. At this point, if the patient's physical condition or stamina is poor, the doctor should promptly assess the situation and decide whether to stop the surgery. If they hadn't planned this 2/3 goal in advance, they would have to continue stubbornly, which might instead pose a risk to the patient. What similarities does a brain tumor surgery have with our daily lives? Baskin says, a high-risk surgery is just a collection of ad hoc actions. In fact, many things in our lives are the same. They are all adventures that can be designed and prepared. That's all for the main content of The Art of Risk. In my life, I will probably never engage in extreme sports, nor will I use all my savings for venture investments. I think most ordinary people probably feel the same way. But Sukul reminds us, adventure is not always about life and death, nor does it necessarily involve huge fortunes. A smart and moderate adventure could be changing a job, developing a new hobby, traveling to an unfamiliar place, or making a new friend. The significance of adventure lies in challenging oneself and accumulating wisdom. It ultimately points to our life experiences, enriching our finite lives through constant exploration. Through Sukul's book, we can further understand how to think about the various opportunities and risks life offers, what we might gain or miss out on. In future decisions, you can also use the advice provided in the book to learn to adjust yourself, develop good decision-making habits, and ultimately make wise personal choices. That's the essence of this book. Feel free to share it with your friends. Congratulations, you've finished another book.